The Master Tavern Keeper's History of the Old World. And so, with their destination, the fallen dwarf hold and mines of Ekrund, and their prize, the Heartstone of Alden Getgold, firmly decided upon, the two dwarf adventurers, Dorin Heldour and Katalin Kandoom, finally set off from Karaz-a-Karak. However, to travel from the peak of Karaz-a-Karak to the heights of the Dragonback Mountains was going to be quite a long and difficult endeavour, and thus, in order to make things as manageable as possible, the two dwarves decided to break up their journey into two distinct parts. First was to be the trek along the old roads of the Border Princes, down south to the dwarf port of Barak-Var. Next would come the more arduous part, the trudge through the northern Badlands, over to the Dragonback Mountains themselves, and then finally to the dwarf hold itself. With their plan of attack set, in the early part of the year 661 of the Imperial calendar, the two adventurers said their farewells to the lawmaster Rurik Hasselfriesen, who wished them every good fortune, and quietly left the dwarf capital, the Everpeak, to begin their trek down the snowy slopes of the World's Edge Mountains, towards the old dwarf road, as it headed west. The very same road they had taken to Van Draj not 4 years earlier. The road to Barak-Var. This time around, though, things were quieter. Even as they travelled through the black deeps, the forests of gloom, they were not set upon by either beastman, arachnid, or forest goblin. Presumably the freezing cold and snow keeping these perennial dangers off the icy roads they normally stalk, and close to the warmth of their fires. Onwards and westwards the two dwarves walked, their axes ever ready, but never being raised in anger, until, eventually, the two dwarves cleared the dark forests of the east and reached the old bridge that stretches over the Skull River.
Och, I was going to ask this earlier, but what's with the naming of all these rivers? Surely Skull River is a bit of a silly name. Are its waters full of skulls or something?
Well, actually, yes. If you cast a fishing net into those waters, you definitely drag up a skull or two. But that's not why it has the name Skull River. Rather, it is named after the many skull-headed, flesh-eating fish that infest it.
Och, the what?
The many skull-headed, flesh-eating fish that infest its waters. They're so deadly that it is said a shoal of them would be able to strip the flesh from a Badlands boar quicker than a Longbeard can finish a pint of dwarf ale.
Oh, yeah, and let me assure you, Master Alchemist, the latter hardly takes any time at all.
Ah, yes, indeed, you are quite correct, my most noble knight. But shall we get back to proceedings, rather than talking about rivers, eh?
Och, for sure. I was just curious is all.
And I am happy to satisfy your curiosity. Anyway, to continue, Dorin and Katalin crossed Skull River without fishy mishaps, I might add, and then followed the road on the other side of the bank until they reached where it forked, which is not very far at all, to be honest. Here, one way leads to the northwest, up to Blackfire Pass, but the other, the south road, leads down to the dwarf sea fortress of Barak-Var, and, obviously, this southern route, the South Road, as it's called, was what they took. The South Road runs alongside Skull River, but on the far bank from the southern part of the Forest of Gloom, which is the home of the Black Spider Forest Goblins. And I've no doubt the two dwarves are happy to have a river of flesh-eating fish between them and those nasty arachnids and their crazed green-skin riders. This part of the road too was fairly quiet, and the two dwarves only encountered a few human traders going north, travelling up from what had once been the imperial province of Lichtenberg, a couple of whom were actually descendants of some of the imperial families that had settled there in point of fact, which is why I mention it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, Master Tavern Keeper, the province of Lichtenberg? I do not know this province at all.
Ah, well, that's not too surprising. It was most short-lived. Lichtenberg was the name given to the province founded by the Emperor Sigismund II, consisting solely of the lands he had newly conquered as part of his southern expansion of the empire at the end of the 5th century. His conquests came over about a decade of fighting, and after such hard-fought gains, the emperor attempted to ensure that the empire kept its newly acquired land by building numerous castles and fortifications. However, in spite of this, the wild, independent streak of the native inhabitants meant that the province only lasted a generation or so before it became ungovernable. The imperial families that had moved there mostly remained and became part of the fabric of the borderlands. Physically, all that remains of note from that era today are the large number of imperial buildings in the trading city of Albion, although it has now fallen under the sway of the southern princes of ancient Kypris on the Tanadante River. Although all that is another discussion for another time, my friends.
Oh, yeah, I see why all this is not well known in the Empire. Few like to dwell on the failures of the past.
This is true. However, failure forgotten dooms you to repeat it. But failure feared means you'll never try again. Neither is a path forward. We must live with and learn from our failures, but never let them rule the roost. Try and try again, as they say. Anyway, back to our tale, eh?
Oh, yeah, please, Master Tavern Keeper.
Well, the two dwarves made some trades with one of these travelling traders from Albion and managed to pick up some valuable hearsay as they went about it. Ah, yes, that's right. My family moved down this way about a century and a half back when it was called Lichtenberg. For that, we'd lived in Altdorf, apparently, but I'm very happy to be able to do business with you, Master Dwarf, on these here cold roads. It's a rare bit of luck that we met. These ever-peak buttons that you've sold me, they're like gold dust up in the fortress town of Grenstadt. They'll be sold within a day. Oi, your destination is Grenstadt, is it? My cousin lives in the Dwarven Quarter there. Do you know Heldour's Luxury Emporium, Madlin? Oh, yes, I do indeed. A fine shop and a fine fellow. I'll gladly pass on your best, Master... Ah, tell him Dorin sends his regards. He'll know who it is. But, as I was saying, my friend and I are heading south. How goes things that way? Ah, yes. Normally, I'd warn you to be careful. Lots of greenskins, you see. From what I hear, though, the greenies have just had a huge tribal war. It's been bloody carnage in the Badlands, and it's all gone quiet, at least for the moment. I'd say you've timed your trip very well, Master Dorin. And so, Dorin Heldour and Katalin Kandoom continued on their way, emboldened by the good news.